Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to NBAV, the NBA Avenue podcast. And I don't want to bury the lead. Let's go right into the Warriors. The Warriors had Steph Curry go down with a double ankle roll in the same game. And the Warriors were notorious for having an easy start this year. Everyone knew the first 5 games for the Warriors are a really easy schedule. So the Warriors, considering that they probably don't have a team that can really make it to a top 5 or 6 seed, and they're going to be in that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 range, they needed this 5-0 start, or a 4-1 start at the very least, in order to put themselves into position to really be a playoff team. They need this, because without a little bit of a head start, they're not going to make it. And then they win the first 2. In game 3, things are looking good. Curry goes down with the injury. And they lose the game, to add insult to injury. So suddenly they went from 2-0 with things looking up that maybe they can run the table and go 5-0 or maybe 4-1. Now suddenly they're 2-1 and they're dealing with an injury to their best player who's going to miss some time. They step into this next game against the New Orleans Pelicans team. The Pelicans go up in the first half, and the Warriors come back with a gutsy victory on the back of Buddy Hield coming out of the slump, getting it done with 28 big points in 29 minutes. Pajemski at the helm, and really an incredible coming out party for Lindy Waters III. Now, he showed some stuff in the preseason. He showed some stuff in the off season, and he was a guy who you're like, okay, maybe he'll be one of those Warriors guys. And you know what I'm talking about. The Warriors do this really more than any other team, where they did this with Gary Payton. Gary Payton came out of nowhere. He was on the team to be cameraman or something, assistant cameraman, Gary Payton the second, and he the same thing happened to Juan Toscano Anderson, wherever Juan Toscano Anderson is right now. I think he's in the G League somewhere. And if he went back on the Warriors right now, he'd probably really be playing for them because he knows the system and he played well when he was a Warrior. You've had this many times for the Warriors, Peyton Toscano Anderson. There are more guys like this where they get an opportunity on the Warriors, and the Warriors trust their guys. You know that if someone goes down, they're going to throw you into the game, and you're going to really get a shot. That's just the way the Warriors are. They believe in their guys. So you saw Lindy Waters III going out there and dropping 21 points in a confident way. He was confident shooting the ball. He had some big corner shots. He did everything, and he also rebounded the ball, getting 8 rebounds, 4 assists. A very complete game in 31 minutes. And you have to just be happy for the guy to get an opportunity on the big stage, and he pulled out an incredibly big victory. Now, of course, you had Kevon Looney throwing in some productive minutes, some productive rebounding. Gary Payton throwing in some productive minutes in only 8 minutes, but they were productive minutes. And the Warriors pull out just an extremely clutch victory to go to 3-1 on the year and continue their quest to start off the season really hot. And now it's an option. Now they just have one more easy game remaining before hopefully they can start to get a timetable on when Steph Curry's really going to be back. So, and when I say easy game, it's not going to be easy. They're going to be playing the Pelicans again. But it's winnable. It's winnable because they did it once, and now they have to do it again. Now, the first time they did it last night was on their home court, and they're on their home court again. So the Warriors literally just have to turn around and do the same exact thing, repeat performance. Now, it's going to be tough. It's tough to play a back-to-back against the same team and win both of them. But the Warriors did it before. They'll have an opportunity to do it again. Let's see if Lindy Waters can start to build a little bit of a legend around him. And I was trying to think of Warriors. How come the Warriors are a team that does this so often? How come the Warriors have these stories? It was such a big story when Toscano Anderson got that contract. and he went from being a two-way player to a guaranteed player, and he was at the press conference and he found out about it. That was a huge story. And Gary Payton was a big story as well. And you start to wonder, like, how did the Warriors continually come up with guys from nowhere who end up being key impact contributors, who end up contributing to playoff basketball? And you just have to think about, well, they try it out a lot. Think of all of the Warriors players who've come and gone from this team. Now, the Warriors have a little bit of magic about them, a little bit of magic in a bottle, and every now and then it works. But the Warriors have gone through a lot of guys. If you think back to the last 10, 15 years of Warriors players, we actually did that on a podcast one time where we went through all of the guys, all the role players, and we tried to determine who the best role players were on the Warriors all time. I think we arrived at Sean Livingston. Was he the best one? Maybe. And they swing and they miss a lot, but sometimes they hit. And Toscano Anderson, Gary Payton, and now Lindsey Waters looking like the next possible success story for the Warriors with a real gutsy victory. And you got to give props to Draymond Green as well, because he's made a habit of making poor decisions on the basketball court. And last night was a time when they could not afford to have silly, stupid Draymond. They had to have in check Draymond. And Draymond, he did his thing. He didn't put up a great statistical night, but you just needed him to lead the team. All he really put in was that 1 3-pointer, but he went up shooting. You had to defend him a little bit, and he led the team. Moses Moody had a strong game. And let's see where the scoring comes from tonight for the Warriors. It'll be interesting to see. Well, I think Lindsey Waters will be able to put up another good game. Buddy Hield is the big question mark, because he's feast or famine. Now he's going to be coming off of a hot game, so it's likely that he'll still be pretty hot in this one. He's getting it going sometimes, like you see with guys like Buddy Hield, like Tim Hardaway Jr. When he's on, he'll be on for several games in a row very often. That was sort of what happened last year for Dallas. In games when Luka and Kyrie weren't playing, or at least one of them wasn't playing, Tim Hardaway Jr. was a big part of winning some early games in the season, and then that enabled them, after they traded him, to then start winning a lot of games later in the year, and they were in pole position. They were in position to get a really high seed, but that's just, for example, a player who can get hot, and then it can translate over from game to game. So it's possible Buddy Hield will have another big night, and the Warriors could win back-to-back games against the Pelicans. The Pelicans have a problem in that Zion is a very good player, but he's not exactly proven 100% in crunch time because he can't turn the ball over. And this is something that we've seen, like with Toronto, with Scotty Barnes. Like he's clearly a very good player, but at this point in his career, he does turn the ball over. And we see it with other guys as well. We'll talk more about it. So the Pelicans, they make this trade. They get DeJounte Murray from the Hawks, and then he's out, so he's not going to be playing. He gets injured in the very first game. And interestingly, we saw that for several players, right? We see that for Isaiah Hartenstein. He goes to the Thunder in this big signing, and now he's not going to be playing for a while. So you have that. You have the same thing for DeJounte Murray, and there were a couple of other ones around the league as well. So the Pelicans just have a whole array of pretty good players, highlighted by Zion, and it's unclear when you hit the end of these close games who exactly is going to be the man. Like, they don't have a clear-cut number one. It would be great if they could consolidate their pieces and get that number one, bona fide number one, where it's undeniable, and the offense is going to be going through him at the end, and yes, he'll dish off to other players, he'll get the ball to Zion, but who's the undeniable? And Zion hasn't made himself undeniable with fourth quarter performances yet. It looked like he was going to do that last year in the playoffs, but unfortunately he got injured at the end of the game where they got eliminated. So, it was really the second to last elimination game. I believe he didn't play in the final game because of the injury. So you had the Warriors putting on a gutsy performance, ending up winning this game by 18. Although it was a lot closer than that. You had the Mavericks getting a great victory against Minnesota. Now, almost all of Anthony Edwards' points were scored in the first quarter. What did he score? Like 24, 25 points in the first quarter, and then he only ended up with like low 30s for the game. So he only scored another handful of points. He ended up with 37. So he scored at 13 points, after or 12, 13 points after the first quarter, but his production didn't stay super hot. When he scored 20 plus points in the first quarter, you're thinking this is a 50 spot coming from Anthony Edwards, because that's what Paolo Banchero did 2 nights ago. He put up a crazy first quarter, and then it translated into a 50-point game when you even it out over the game. And it didn't work out that way for Edwards. He was dealing with some injury problems. But also, Edwards at the end of the game was turning the ball over. He had several turnovers. And when you have Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle both getting caught up in traffic, turning the ball over, just dribbling and getting the ball swiped at from behind and losing it, these guys were two peas in the same pod last night. It was not pretty. And nobody is missing Julius Randle right now from the New York Knicks. Not to say that the Knicks aren't having some struggles of their own. They still have to get going, and they're playing another tough game tonight, but nobody's missing Julius Randle, I'll tell you that much. It really does not look pretty because you have two players who both get themselves caught up in traffic. Now, Anthony Edwards has a bit more of a flair for the spectacular, and sometimes he gets those shots to go. Now, sometimes Randle does too, but they both have a habit of getting themselves caught up in the double team, and where Karl-Anthony Towns was a more passive player, maybe that sort of worked in terms of the cohesiveness, where you can't have all the players on your team just try to bully their way in and get caught up in traffic. You need players who can step out and just catch and shoot the three. You need players who can just play off of those guys who get caught up in trouble. And if Edwards and Randle are both going to do that same thing, well, it's not exactly going to work out for them. So a good victory here for Dallas. Luka, it wasn't like the prettiest game ever, but he did hit the really big dagger, super deep bomb three when he needed to, which sort of pulled it out. You haven't seen the Mavericks play their best basketball yet, but at 3-1, nobody's complaining for Dallas. This is the sort of the start they needed. They didn't want to. You just didn't want to start off in that malaise like we talked about before opening night. You didn't want to. You didn't want them to start off slow, and they're not starting off slow. They're starting off hot. They're 3-1, and they're going to get hotter as the second half of the season hits, which is what they did last season, and that's typically what Luka does. Is he gets better as the season goes on. So the fact that they're 3-1 right now, very, very good sign for them. And then in other games we had last night, you had the Nuggets going to another overtime, and we said that that game was going to be close because Brooklyn was playing well, and the Brooklyn behind Claxton was playing really well. So then last night it was really the Thomas game, was the Cam Thomas just going out there putting up a great game, especially when he needed to, hitting some really big shots. He had the 26, Schroeder with 28. Cam Johnson threw up a 20, including some clutch buckets, 17 from Finney Smith, 18 from Zaire Williams, 11 from Jalen Wilson. A very balanced, very, very balanced game for the Brooklyn Nets. They put up a great game, and you knew that the Nuggets are struggling. But for the second straight night, and we talked about this, playing with fire. We talked about it from the Indiana Pacers perspective, that they play with fire and they try to come back and win the games late. And the Nuggets try to do the same thing, but for the second night in a row, they did it. And it's a bad strategy. You don't want to have to be playing super close games every single night against bad teams. When you have a bad team on the schedule, you want to take advantage of it. But at least they have some respect for themselves. At least when they turn it to 100, they are getting it done. They're a fighting team. They fight every single opportunity they have. They don't give up on the game. If they need to really get it done at the end, they can. And before the season, we said Russell Westbrook, most improved player of the year, which people are going to think is crazy. And I don't necessarily know if he's going to win the award, but my point is this Nuggets team, with losing KCP and losing Bruce Brown previously, like, they need someone to score. And if Michael Porter Jr. isn't going to be incredible, who's a real scorer? A scorer outside of Jokic and Murray. Now, Gordon will get his points because of his role as the free-flowing big man, but who's the scorer? Who's the shooter? It's not going to be Christian Brown, or however you want to say it. He's not that kind of guy. And Julian Strawther could be okay, but he's not that guy yet. Maybe in several seasons he'll be that guy. Peyton Watson's not that guy. So Russell Westbrook is going to have a big statistical year. Whether you like it or not, whether he's efficient or not, he's going to put up a lot of numbers because they're desperate for someone to score. And it's not that Russell Westbrook is the best option. It's not that he's a great shooter, but he's going to do it every now and then. He's going to have great nights because, at least in terms of putting up a lot of points, because there's nowhere else for the Nuggets to go with the basketball. It's out of necessity, out of minutes. So we're going to see more nights like this from Westbrook. And I picked Jokic for the MVP, which is never a bad pick, but in this season it makes a lot of sense because look what he has to do for his team to win. He has to put up 40 points in overtime the previous game against the Raptors. Then he has to come back with 29 points, 16 assists, 18 rebounds, a monstrosity of a triple-double in 41 minutes in order for them to win this one. So suddenly, Jokic is climbing those MVP rankings just because of necessity. This was the basis of my picks. I picked Jamal Mosley for Coach of the Year because I think their team is going to be the 3 seed, and if their team is the 3 seed, there's a good chance he wins Coach of the Year because who's going to be the 2 or the 1 is going to be Boston. So Boston's probably going to be the 1. They're not going to win Coach of the Year with that incredible roster. You have the Thunder. Mark Dagnall's not going to win Coach of the Year with that incredible roster. So who's going to win it? Good chance Jamal Mosley's going to win it with the Orlando Magic. And now you're starting to see the odds drop, and he's not getting as good odds because it's becoming more of a possibility. But those were my picks before the season. Unfortunately, I didn't put any cash on it, but maybe I should. Then in the final game of the night, you had the Kings beating the Jazz. The Jazz are a gift on the schedule right now. They're starting off real slow, and they're preparing for a big fire sale. There's going to be some names available on the Utah Jazz. You're going to have potentially Markkanen, Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton. Those 4 guys are guys that teams are going to want. Now, they're not going to give them to you for free. That's not the Danny Ainge way. But for now, take advantage when you see them on the schedule, and the Kings did. The Kings and Nuggets both started the season 0-2 in the West, and now they're both 2-2, evening the score. The Nuggets had to do it on the back of 2 overtime games. The Kings a little bit of an easier, more respectable way of doing it, but doesn't matter. 2-2 is the record. Coming up on the docket tonight, you have a rematch. The Hawks just lost to Washington, and now they're going to play Washington again. The Hawks lost at home. Now they're going to play on the road. Now, it doesn't matter. This is the Wizards did it off hot shooting. If they're going to beat the Hawks again, they're going to need more hot shooting. Otherwise, expect Atlanta to even the score and clean up here and go to 3-2 on the season. You have possibly the game of the night. It's the Lakers against the Cavaliers. Now, I'd love to see the injury report just to see if anyone is going to be missing the game tonight for the Lakers. Let's just quickly check. You just have D'Angelo Russell is day-to-day. D'Angelo Russell is day-to-day, and Austin Reeves is day-to-day. So we'll expect both of those guys to play. Outside of that, that's really the only news. So you're looking at a full Lakers team. And then for the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's just really Strus. And then, unfortunately, Imani Bates is underwent surgery as well for a torn meniscus. So you have Max Strus, just the typical, and Craig Porter, but he wasn't playing big minutes anyway. So you're going to have basically a full slot. Now, it's tough to pick against the team until they lose. Cleveland is real hot. This has 5-0 written all over it. I don't know why. That's a feeling that I get. They're too hot right now. Are they going to lose it? Is it going to be the Lakers who take them? The Lakers, they've met the first bit of adversity. It'll be very interesting to see how they respond. I wouldn't pick the Lakers if you're a gambling man. I wouldn't pick the Lakers to win the game unless you have really good odds. But because until Cleveland loses one, I'd just be hesitant to pick against them. And it's going to be the same thing for Boston playing Indiana tonight. I'm going to go with Boston. You're going to ride them. Anyway, Boston's going to win 80% of their games no matter which way you slice it. So why would you pick Indiana, an inconsistent team, a slow starting team in the first 2 quarters, to beat Boston? It's just not a great pick, regardless of whether or not it can technically happen. I'm going to ride with Boston and Cleveland until they lose a game. Then you have the Pistons going against the 76ers. Now, the Pistons aren't as bad as they seem on paper, but the problem is that when they get to the fourth quarter, they don't have a way of pulling these games out because nobody's taking the bull by the horns. And for the 76ers side, even if Embiid and Paul George aren't playing, Maxey can lead them at the end of the game to a victory. So you got to think the 76ers have a good chance at winning their second ball game tonight. That's who I would go with. Then you have the Raptors. They're going to play the Hornets. It's probably going to be without Scotty Barnes. We can just check on that very quickly. So you have Toronto going against, let's see, they're going to be, again, without Kelly Olynyk. They'll be without Emmanuel Quickley. He's doubtful. They're going to be without Scotty Barnes. He's not going to be there. So you're really going to have to think that Charlotte has a great chance of winning this one, considering that the defense is just not the same. This is gonna without Scotty Barnes. This is gonna be a Barrett game. This is gonna be a big RJ Barrett game. So that is why you have a great chance for Charlotte to win this game coming up tonight. So the Charlotte Hornets, they should be able to do some damage here and maybe get a victory, although you never know. Not a very good team. But I would go with Charlotte tonight, considering the Scotty Barnes injury is a big one. Then you have another big game. You have the New York Knicks and you have the Miami Heat. Miami Heat have started off pretty strong. They're 2-1. The Knicks are 1-2. Now Miami, the reason why it feels like they started strong is because they often start slow and they often dwindle away. They often bungle away games, and you're like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, we need this team to be in the playoff mix so that Jimmy can work some magic." And if they play with disaster, then oftentimes it doesn't work out. Although it did one time a couple of years ago, where Jimmy was able to get them to the finals. So what's going to be tonight? The Knicks against the Heat. It's a toss up. This is a toss up game. The Knicks haven't hit their stride. Brunson hasn't hit his stride. I think he might hit it tonight. But the Heat are an unpredictable team, and the Knicks so far haven't got it going. So I think that the Knicks, this is the type of game they play well in, but they haven't got it going yet, and they're struggling on defense. They've been playing Hakporti now more in backup center. So let's see what happens there. Let's see if Karl Anthony Towns gets more shots. Let's see if the Knicks put it together. And let's see if the Heat continue to keep it together. Then you have the Brooklyn Nets against the Memphis Grizzlies. So the Nets going against the Grizzlies. Ja Morant will be back in the lineup. Let's see if he puts up a big game tonight. The game will either be super close. The Grizzlies aren't getting blown out, or the Grizzlies will take this one pretty easily. That's the way I see this one going. A very good chance of victory for the Grizzlies tonight against the Nets. Then you have Orlando going against Chicago. Orlando is extremely consistent. They're playing very well. Look for them to beat Chicago. Chicago's played against a couple of teams that weren't playing great basketball, and I expect Orlando to run them out of their own building tonight. That's what I see happening. You have the San Antonio Spurs going against the Oklahoma City Thunder. You're going to see all the headlines. It's going to be Chet against Wemby, the two guys who could be the defensive players of the year, and I'm going to ride with the Thunder team, especially against the Spurs team, which is really not a good team, although they do have Wemby. So I would go with the Thunder. It's also a bit of a revenge game. Chris Paul has played again for the Thunder, and now he's going against the Thunder, but Thunder are just a little too good for the Spurs team. I would pick them every single time. You have the Pelicans-Warriors rematch tonight. Who is going to take it? Are the Pelicans? I think the Pelicans are going to fight back. They might take it and even the score and depress the Warrior fans. And the Warriors will be 3-2. I think the Pelicans would be the same. Then you have the Blazers against the Clippers. It's a game that nobody really cares about. Clippers are playing well, so let's ride with the Clippers going against a real bottom barrel team like the Trailblazers. That's all we got for you today. As always, we're your source for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.